Hi and welcome to the video. If you enjoy it and find it useful, please remember to like it below. While you're there, why not subscribe and find out what other projects we've been up to recently. So here we are, the Airfix de Havilland Mosquito B.XVI, a new tooling. Let's have a look at what you get in the box. Traditional from Airfix, really cool box art. Let's have a look here. We have instructions, very good. We have bags, lots and lots of pieces, and our transfers or decals. Let's have a look at these individually for a moment. So first up, the plastic parts. There's quite a lot here. It's quite a build, although it's only skill level 2. So what have we got here? Six plastic sprues plus the transparencies as well. Pretty straightforward looking at these. Upper and lower wings, fuselages, engines, props, undercarriage for both sides, interiors here and here, and bombs, bomb bay doors, so on and so forth. Quite a lot there. The transparencies here, lots and lots of options, so this obviously is a single mould for many versions. Well, I suppose it saves on development and manufacturing costs. As usual, the parts very cleanly moulded, can't see any flash on anything here. Lots of varieties, lots of interesting bits and pieces, but we'll talk about those in a minute. So the instruction booklet, absolutely up to usual Airfix standards. There's a lot of very clear explanations of where things go, how they fit together, options. This has got some really cool stuff here. There's a bit here where you're using the part of the wing structure as a jig to make the undercarriage, which you can then take away, paint the plane, put the undercarriage back in, which makes a lot of sense and makes life a lot easier. And there's also a bit here where you have a physical mask. If you're doing an undercarriage down, you want to spray the plane, you've done the work on the interior of the undercarriage bay, they're supplying you with plastic masks, so you cover those up, don't ruin all your interior work when you do the spraying. I guess with the bomb bay you can just use the closed bomb bay doors if you're going to do an open bomb bay. There are 2 colour options for this aircraft supplied with the kit. The first is an aircraft of number 571 Squadron, part of the Pathfinder group of the RAF. This is in daylight bomber colours, and it depicts an aircraft that it was photographed shortly after being returned from maintenance. So there's a few odd panels here and there that I haven't been painted properly. There's even some PRU blue prop spinners. This is the aircraft I'm going to make today. The other is an aircraft number 109 Squadron, and this aircraft is in the night bomber colours, so black undersides. And there's plenty of stencils if you really want to get into the detail. One really bizarre thing is the size of the pilot in this kit. Here I've compared it to one from a Harrier, and yes, the Harrier pilot's wearing a helmet, but the Mossie pilot looks like a very small air cadet next to him. And if you put it next to the Mossie control column, this pilot looks very small. I've done some measurements and it seems to scale to about 4'8". Fairly small even for an RAF pilot. So I start with cleaning the sprues in a mild detergent solution, rinsing and drying, and then this time I'm giving a lot of the components some interior green spray. The interior green I'm using is the Vallejo IDF green that seems to match British interior green of the World War II very well. As always, remember to use some pliers or a craft knife to remove pieces from the sprue, and do remember to sand them down and do some dry fit to make sure things go well before committing with glue. Here I've got the cockpit floor and I'm adding some highlighting to some of the cabling on the floor. I'm not sure if it's going to be visible ultimately, but it's worth doing, I think. I'm also doing some detailing and some shading to the front and rear bulkheads of the bomb bays. These will fit to the underside of the cockpit floor. The pilot seat comes in 4 pieces: the seat back and the 2 sides. All of these get painted in the interior IDF green first, with the seat cushions on the back and the base highlighted in dark green. We then add the rear bulkhead of the avionics bay or electronics bay. Here the back panel gets some black at the bottom of it, and all the radio boxes need to be painted black too. And while we've got the black out, we may as well paint the control column. The flight instrument panel is painted black back and front, and then we apply the very detailed decal. As usual, a spot of micro set and then slide the decal onto dry. Next I'm putting on the observer's seat or navigator bomb aimer. This has a seat back which glues onto the cockpit floor and then a cushion that glues on as well. The seat back and cushion again are highlighted with dark green. Then behind the seat goes what looks like some control piping, and then also one of the radio sets goes next. Then in goes the rear bulkhead of the electronics bay, and I've just highlighted some of this with sort of random bits of white and a few spots of red and yellow just to make it stand out. And then the last of the electronics equipment gets slotted in front of it. Next to the forward section of the cockpit, I'm gluing this to the rest of the cockpit floor, held vertically, so that while it's setting it doesn't tend to fall over. I can also add the pilot's chair in its position at this point. So while all of that is drying and setting up, I'm going to get on with some more shading. Here I'm shading the inside of the cockpit walls, and I'll also, as I've got the shading powder out, do the inside of the undercarriage bays as well. Next up, we attach the instrument panel to its supporting structure, and then we add the joystick control column, and finally the instrument cluster after that. The last thing into the cockpit is the bomb sight at the front. There's a couple of tanks that sit at the top of the bomb bay, which is immediately under the cockpit floor. These are painted a sort of brick red, rusty brown, and straps in interior green with a filler cap in aluminium. This glues to the roof of the bomb bay, as I've said before, and then the whole cockpit section slides into the side of the fuselage. I do have to say that this is a very, very good fit, as long as you've followed all the instructions precisely. We then put in the front bulkhead of the tailwheel compartment, and finally we can put the two halves of the fuselage together. Again, these spars are superb at helping get everything registered together. Bits of glue and lots of clamps, and we'll leave that to set up. There's a small observation window next that's going to go under the nose of the aircraft in a panel. Do note that this transparency, just like the underwing lights, has a very obvious way that it has to go in. The thinner way, narrow way, goes into the hole. The top way with a tab aligns it and stops it going through. Just press the transparency into place and secure it with a few dabs of PVA glue around the edge. The whole panel then glues into place nicely under the nose. There's a fairing at the rear of the bomb bay that needs to go on next. And then there are a couple of plugs or fillets that go into holes that are in the fuselage. I guess these are for different options for different versions of the Mosquito. Next on is the classically designed de Havilland shaped rudder that just simply glues into place. Each horizontal stabiliser or tailplane comes in two pieces. Glue them together, hold them with clamps, let them dry. The tailplane segments have a kind of tongue and groove arrangement so that when you feed them through the fuselage, they'll meet up and keep each other absolutely horizontal. So a few stabs of glue, slide them into place, and there we go, absolutely level. Next on the list is the scary looking undercarriage. The first thing to do is clean up all the undercarriage components. There's lots and lots and lots of these little nodules on the outside. Clean all of those up, give everything a nice coat of aluminium or silver paint. There are 7 components to each leg of the undercarriage, and it looks a bit daunting, but it really isn't as difficult as it might first seem. So we start by gluing this cross member here to one leg of the undercarriage, and to the other leg of the undercarriage there's an actuator leg, a hydraulic actuator that slots into holes very nicely there. The kit has been designed so that you use the lower surface of the wing, which is effectively the top of the wheel well, as a form to help hold all the pieces together whilst you assemble the undercarriage. This is a superb idea from Airfix. Slot in both main parts of the undercarriage and then glue in the small cross member you attached to one of the sides earlier. Next, there is a small cross brace at the back. This really secures the structure and makes things very, very steady. Then we can add the mud guard. Again, because it glues over a few parts of the structure, this helps the overall strength of the piece. Finally, when it's all dried nice and securely, you can take the undercarriage leg out and attach this lubricant tank. Repeat essentially the same but in mirror form on the other side, and there are your undercarriage legs ready and waiting. Onto the wings now, and first thing I'm going to do is drill out the holes for the fitting of the long range fuel tanks. 1mm drill bit does the job. There's also this light cover which I slot in. There's a little tab to show you which way it should go, and then once it's secured with a bit of PVA, I paint the back of it with silver. This makes it look more reflective on the finished model. Then the two halves of the wing are ready to go together. By the way, don't try and join these two parts of the inner leading edge. That's the radiator slots, that should be open. With everything checked on a dry fit, we can go back, put in the glue and put some clamps on to keep it steady. Each exhaust stack, and there are 2 per engine, comes in 2 pieces. I guess it's too difficult to mould them in one piece. The holders for the stacks come with these very handy arrows moulded on the back to show you which way it should go. I've then sort of mirrored that on the inside in pencil because that lines up better with the arrows that are shown in the instructions. The halves of each stack glue together very straightforwardly, quite accurately, and then they get put into their holders, and you'll notice that they actually sit at a downward angle. Then the stack goes on the inside of the engine bay and the exhausts poke out through the side. Do just double check you've got the right stack with the right bit of engine. On then to building the engine nacelles themselves, and each comes with a front and a rear bulkhead for the undercarriage bay. The propeller mounting comes in two parts that just push together with a tiny dab of glue inside, and then they slot into a recess on the front end of the nacelles. Now don't glue them into place if you want your propeller to turn. Then glue the two halves of the nacelles together. The nacelles are obviously made for more than one mark of Mosquito with their relevant Merlin engines. So here you can fit the extra bits of scoops and vents for the B.XVI that we're building today. If you're building the model in flight with the gear doors closed, you need to remove these tabs at this point. The nacelles then slot very neatly into place on the wings. The wingtips are formed in transparent plastic. This is great for allowing for the navigation lights on the tips, but it also allows for many variants of the kit in future. The wingtips slot very simply into place at the end of the wings. Next is the radiator grille. This is painted silver before being slotted into the wing. Each piece has arrows pointing upward and outward, so they slot easily into the right position. And that completes the build of the wing. All you have to do now is do exactly the same, but for the other side. While the wings are drying up, we can move on to the bomb rack, and the front and rear supports of this have different locator pegs. One is square and one's round. They sit in place at the top of the bomb bay. When they're secure, the bomb pylons go in, two at the front and two at the back. The pylons at the back have an angled mounting, so the bomb sits on a slope. So it's important to get the right ones in the right place. Another task to do at the moment, you can add the reinforcing strut to the inside of each bomb bay door. The bombs each come in 3 pieces, 2 halves and a round tail fin. Glue them up and let them dry before sanding to a good finish and spray dark green. The dried and set wings are now ready to fit to the fuselage. The spars here make this very easy and very secure. The long-range fuel tanks come in halves, simply glue together, then place on the underside of the wing where we drilled the holes earlier. I'm putting on the canopy at this point, using PVA glue to hold it in place. There are specific side panels to this mark to be fitted as well. This can be fitted to the canopy before or after it goes on the fuselage. Next, I'm applying a bit of tape to the inside of the cockpit to mask the window frame on each side of the nose. And then I gently pack the area with tissue. I'll also pack the tail wheel well. I've put the canopy on because it makes it a bit easier to mask up for spraying. Of course, since I made this video, an aftermarket set has become available with pre-cut masks. I can now fit the superb masking pieces supplied in the kit over the undercarriage bays, and I'll also clip on the closed bomb bay door to protect the interior of the bomb bay. The beautifully textured tyres each come in 2 pieces. Now they are weighted, so they have flat spots on them, so make sure you align these before gluing up. The aircraft of the scheme I'm doing had the strange photo reconnaissance blue prop bosses. Just mix up some mid-blue grey if you don't have the exact colour. I'm also taking the time now to paint the propellers. First they get an all-over coat of matte black, then I pick out the tips with white paint, then cover that with yellow. I find that yellow just isn't dense enough and strong enough on its own. The white base really helps it stand out. When the tyres are set up, they get a coat of tyre black. I'm going to use detail powder wash later to bring out the tread patterns. And while I've got the tyre black out, I can finish painting up the tail wheel. I do find that a block of wood with some blue tack and some cocktail sticks is invaluable for doing all these fiddly little bits. So on to the overall paint. First I'll do the underside in medium sea grey, then mask off these underside areas so I can do the top a mix of ocean grey and dark green. I spray first, then touch up the edges with a brush, which I think gives a better result at this scale. The brush is also used for the odd panels that have been supplied in different colours. I'll also place the wing roundels on the top side of the wings now, as they need to set up before I start the detail wash on the top of the wing. And while I have the wash prepared, I'll also do the tyres too. When we've finished all the spraying, if you want you can take off the wheel well covers and the bomb bays. I'll also take this time to paint the exhausts in gunmetal. Then I set about more decals. The roundels for the side and the fin flashes help make the plane really look more and more complete. Many of the stencils supplied are very small and fiddly, but they do add to the overall detail effect. There are even tiny decals on the prop bosses. Once those are set up, I can build the props themselves. There's a back plate, and this sits against a propeller with an alignment peg. This allows the prop boss to line up and fit perfectly over the top. I can also fit the aluminium painted wheel hubs inside the tyres. The bombs have their own decals, which is a nice detail touch, a yellow stripe to indicate that these are live rounds, and a stenciled description near the tail. Do try and take the time to check they're all aligned with each other. If you want, then you can fit the bombs to the bomb bay. The large alignment tabs make this job really easy. Now I'm going to add the undercarriage legs. Now if you forgot to mark which was which earlier, the inner leg of each set has an extra actuator arm. I find it easiest to slot the rear part in first and then hinge it down so that the front engages. I can also now fit the tail wheel. First I'll take out the tissue I packed before spraying, then simply feed the leg into a slot on the front bulkhead. These supports for the bomb bay doors very simply slot into their respective bulkheads. While those are setting up, I'll put on the undercarriage bay doors. These locate on pins moulded into the nacelles. Moving ever closer to the end, and the propellers can go onto the engines now. One thing to remember is to take off any masking fluid on lights and ports that you may have used. Also, I can now take off the mask on the canopy and on the wingtips. With these supports set up nicely, I can fit the bomb bay doors. Then I can fit the wheels and tyres to the undercarriage legs. Setting them at the right angle for the weighted tyres is tiresome. There really should be some sort of alignment tab. Then there are the windows over the two small holes either side of the fuselage. We attach these using PVA. And then finally we put on the nose transparency for the bomb aimer, and that completes the build. One last go over with some detail wash, and I think the kit looks pretty good. It's well designed with model makers firmly in mind, although I still do have one or two tiny reservations. However, I must say it looks superb when complete. Now remember, if you enjoyed this, and please like it below, and whilst you're there, subscribe to follow other builds in the pipeline. Thanks for watching, see you next time.